Hello, everybody. Justin Adkins here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I am making a whale inspired card from the Whale Hello stamp set from scrapbook.com. Now, I will be using the large and small whales primarily, and I will be coloring them up with Copic markers. As you can see, I am using the soon to be released Rose Quartz exclusive Misty, only available at scrapbook.com. I will make sure to link this below so you can sign up to be notified when this Misty does become available to purchase. I use this Rose Quartz exclusive scrapbook.com Misty to get my images all lined up so I can go ahead and stamp them with Copic Safe ink and get them all colored. I love using my Misty to stamp out images that I'm going to go in and color later because the Misty does allow me to get multiple impressions for full ink coverage. Now, I do have a very easy little tutorial about how I colored up these whales using my Copic markers. I only use 3 markers to color them up. I'm using C4, C2, and C0, and this is going to allow me to get really nice shading and highlights for these whales. I didn't want them super dark. I wanted to keep them on the lighter side, wanted to stick towards more the gray color because I'll have a lot of other blue tones working in my project, but that's how I made the decision to use a cool gray marker instead of one of the other Copic marker gray varieties. I'm doing the process that I call coloring twice, which is when I color my image the first time through fully, and I then repeat the process and color my image up for a second time. The reason why I color twice is because I'm able to get a really nice saturation of my colors by doing so, but also with Copic markers, it's important that you have a wet surface to work off of. No, I'm not talking about dipping your paper in water, but you want to make sure that your colored image that it's a little wet from the ink from the Copic markers, which makes it easier to move the alcohol ink around and get those nice blends going on with your markers. So by me coloring up my images twice, it does allow me to get those really nice blends going, and I love just the way that it looks. What I do love about using these whale images is they're pretty simple to color up. You don't have to go and use a bunch of colors. Like I said, I am just using 3 Copic markers to go ahead and get my blends going. I love how this looks, and you could even use just 1 marker if you just wanted them to be a solid color. These images would also look fantastic if you went ahead and stamped them onto a colored cardstock, and maybe you used embossing powder when you stamp them. That would always make the little elements pop as well. But these are just really nice images that no colorist of any level should be afraid to color up. They're really easy and they're going to make your projects super cute. Now, one tip that I have is whenever you're coloring and you might color outside of the line, I recommend investing in some good white gel pen markers. This will help you clean up those edges nicely. Also, because whales have more of a skin and not a fur, I do go in and add some speckles in with my Copic markers. My rule of thumb is I like to use these for fish, underwater creatures, reptiles, scaly critters. It looks really nicely with, and I just sort of work from the shadows outward. I don't like covering my whole image with them. I just sort of like to start at those shadowed areas and then start with my darkest marker and then just keep moving towards lighter and lighter. And I usually tend to use the exact same markers that I use when coloring the image. Now, what I do for a little extra pop is I do go in with my white gel pen and I add a couple more specks as well. These pop really nicely onto the project, and it just adds that really fun detail to your colored up image. Now next I'm going to go ahead and pull the high A2 cover plate die, and I'm going to use this and die cut it from the rainbow glitter paper. But as you can see, I am trimming off my high so that I don't have the frame, and then I also die cut it just from white cardstock as well. Little rule of thumb, make sure to save those dots that go above the eye. Now, when I work with the glitter paper from scrapbook.com, I like to use my dotted adhesive roller instead of using a liquid adhesive. The dotted adhesive roller grips very nicely onto the glitter paper, as opposed to when you use a liquid adhesive, it's gonna take some extra time to dry. So I just go ahead, I use my dotted adhesive roller, and I get everything all nice and situated. I'm also able to use it on the dot for the eye as well, and just am very careful in getting it nice and placed. Next, I pull out my 6x8 paper pads of the rainbow glitter paper and of the Playful Smooth cardstock, and in both I use the lighter blue offerings with the nested rectangle die cuts. I'm using the third largest on the Playful Smooth cardstock, and I am using the second largest on the aqua glitter paper. Now, after my image is die cut, I do go in with a scrapbook.com medium blending brush, and I use the Something Borrowed ink by Catherine Pooler to add a little bit of shading to my image. I start from the bottom and I work my way up, and I try to be very light-handed, as I do want that Something Borrowed to blend nicely into just the natural color of the cardstock. So I'm just kind of lightly going back and forth. I always like to dab off the excess ink because I don't want any sort of splotches on my paper. The scrapbook.com blending brushes work so nicely for blending up your ink. I next move on to the Suede Shoes ink by Catherine Pooler, and I add that to the bottom of my panel, and I do the same process of just lightly shifting it upwards a little bit. And that gives a really nice shading towards the bottom, and it gives me the effect of like a deep ocean look. I then grab an acrylic block and I grab my Whale Hello stamp set so I can use the Wave Ripples design to stamp a little bit of extra detail onto my ink blended panel. Using my Suede Shoes ink, I go ahead and I stamp out these waves just a couple times onto the panel. I thought that this would be a good wave to add a little bit of rippliness to the water. Even though I am going for an underwater look, I think it's just going to work very nicely with the images that I'm using for my little scene. Now, after cleaning up my workspace, I reach back for my Whale Hello stamp set, and I put back my waves and I grab the little heart bubbles. I'm going to use them with my acrylic block as well, and I'm going to use my Something Borrowed ink, and I'm also going to stamp these little heart bubbles for my little scene as well. I just love using the little embellishment stamps for my cards to really help jazz up my background. I never really let them take like a front focal point just because they're usually not intended for that unless you find a way to use it. But I just like kind of having them go off the panel and add that fun little touch to it. Now I can get into the process of laying everything out for my panel. I know that my high die is going to fit really nicely right in the center, and I just sort of begin to fidget around with where I want each of my whales to go. So you're going to see I'm going to change my mind a couple times, and that's kind of a nice thing about using that dotted adhesive roller. Once I put it down, it's not the hardest to pull it right back up. As opposed to if you're using liquid glue, you get those couple seconds of wiggle room, and then after it sets and dries to your paper, you're kind of out of luck. So I do love when I'm a little unsure of where everything is going to go. I do like to use that dotted adhesive roller by scrapbook.com. Now I'm getting my layers ready. I'm doing my ink blended layer on top of my aqua glitter paper from the Rainbow Glitter Paper Collection. And as you can see, I'm already fidgeting again, moving these whales around because I want those tails to overlap off the sides, but not go off the edge of the card. For whatever reason, when I craft, I don't really love my elements to go off the actual A2 sized area, but I think it's really fun that when you're using a nested element inside, if they go off the side of one of the nested layers, because it gives you that sort of 3D feature with it without actually going off the edge of the card. Now, I thought I was going to get away with only using 3 of my 4 colored images, but I did decide to go ahead and pull in the 4th one. So I go ahead, I add my larger whale, have all 4 on there. I use my dotted adhesive roller, and I begin the process of adhering all of my panels together. Now, this is where a little bit of an oops happens, and I do get a little bit of a something borrowed ink smudge on top of my whales because I didn't clean my glass mat off all the way. Now, I do find a way to remedy this as best as possible, but that's why I like to recommend if you're ink blending, do your best just to clean off your surfaces before you go ahead and start using your precious colored images on top of them. I do salvage as best as I can, and I love the way everything turns out. I'm able to go in with my gel pen, add a couple little extra dots. I'm also able to do a little bit of creative layering with my die cuts, and of course, we're going to go in and add a little bit of pops of color later, but I'll get into that when we get to it. So after I fix my boo-boos, I go ahead, I add some dotted adhesive roller to my high die that's all layered and ready to go. I have it right in the center, and we're going to put it into place. And once I get the main part of the die ready to go, I also make sure to grab the little dot for the eye and get that placed so all the shadowing lines up with that blue glitter paper. So once I get that ready, I go ahead and I adhere the rest of my panel to my A2 sized card front. And then after we get that in place, I still want to go ahead and do a little bit of a customized sentiment. And I'm going to show you how I do that next. Now, using the scrap piece of paper from the Playful Smooth cardstock I used for my previous layer, I grabbed the Suede Shoes ink by Catherine Pooler and I just dragged the ink pad across the bottom edge of the paper. Now, do make sure that this ink is dry before you attempt any heat embossing. If the ink is any sort of wet, the embossing powder will still stick to it. I go ahead, I grab my Whale Hello stamp set and pull out the sentiment that also reads Whale Hello, and I position it with my Rose Quartz Misty. Using some mint tape, I do go ahead and I mask off my sentiment so only the whale word is revealed. Using a magic anti-static brush by Pink and Main, I put that over my paper, and then I use some watermark embossing ink, also by Pink and Main, to stamp my whale sentiment. I use frosting embossing powder by Pink and Main to go ahead and get everything all ready to go for my sentiment, and I clean it up a little bit with a fine toothbrush. Now I do go in and I heat emboss it with my heat gun, and this is going to set my sentiment, and I will able to fussy cut it out so that I can put it onto my card. I go in with my dotted adhesive roller once again and I put it into place. This whale word also helps cover up a blue smudge from when I got my card a little messy from my ink, but this is about the last bit that I have to cover up. I kind of fidget with it a little bit just because I want to make sure that it's nice and level. And once I get it into place, I push it down and I'm ready to add some snowflake glitter pops of color. Now, this is a new 4-ounce bottle of the Snowflake Glitter Pops of Color, and it's just such a great value if this is one of your favorite colors of the Pops of Color to use. Once I get my Pops of Color all adhered to my card, it just has to dry and it is ready to go. So, thank you guys so very much for stopping by my YouTube channel today. I hope this card leaves you inspired to go ahead and create a super fun card using the Whale Hello stamp set by scrapbook.com. Once again, thank you for stopping by. Make sure to like and subscribe, and happy crafting. Goodbye.